And that is, I want to talk about the relationship between British actress Liz Hurley, famously, obviously, a former partner of Hugh Grant, and her son Damien. And their relationship makes many people, including me, uncomfortable. For years, it is Damien who has been behind the camera taking the half undressed and sexualized pictures of his mum for social media, which is weird, right? Like, I mentioned this to my daughter, who actually knew Damien. They used to go to the same summer camp together in Gloucestershire. But that's an aside. But I thought that was weird. And now what we've seen is Damien has progressed from taking these half undressed pictures of his mum to actually his directorial debut being one of of directing his mum in sex scenes, which is just, it just creeps me out. And I thought, who can I discuss this with? And I thought, I know the woman. And she is Lucinda Lidston. She is a clinical director, a senior clinical psychotherapist. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Lucinda. I always appreciate your, well, just no nonsense approach, because is it wrong for me to find that icky? Because this is not really a celebrity story. This is about a son and a mother conducting a very public relationship that seems completely inappropriate. And I wanted your feedback on that.
Yeah, so I'm 100% in agreement with you. And the first thing I did when I was researching and thinking about this piece was to ask my sons. So they're 27 and 28. And I said to them, can you think of any scenario where you would feel comfortable photographing me in a bikini? And they were no. And I said, well, and also, how about if you were a filmmaker, how would you feel about directing me in a sex scene? And they were both absolutely horrified, really horrified. And I think if we're truthful, most of us are, aren't we? So
Yeah.
yeah.
Nobody wants to imagine their parents having sex for a start, right? So it's along those lines, isn't it? It's an ick attached to it. And there has to be an evolutionary, a natural reason why we feel ick at that thought.
Yes, and that's a really good point. Like, nobody necessarily teaches us to feel ick. We just naturally do, don't we? It's just one area where we don't want to go. And to be fair about Liz Hurley, she's not the only celeb, is she? Kerry Katona was criticised a while back for taking pictures of herself in her underwear with her 12-year-old daughter looking on, and the look on her little daughter's face, like she's obviously idolising her mum. And people were saying, oh, what a load of nonsense, it's just like wearing a bikini. But we're not talking about levels of nakedness even. We're talking about displaying your sexual nature, even in a mild way, in front of your children and crossing those boundaries. And where does this end? For people that do OnlyFans, you're going to have your children in the room when you're doing your OnlyFans vids, So where do we draw the line? And I do think, sorry, Sonia, were you going to say
No,
something?
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. And I do think, is this just another way that our society is degenerating? And
Right.
you've done a lot of pieces about the sexualization of children. And albeit, we are talking about an adult child here. He's 21, I believe. But there were reports from 2018. So that's what, 6 years ago, of him taking photos of his mum then, when he was a young lad. He's certainly under the age of 18. And I'm always very wary as a therapist, because I know that we've not got them in the room, we're not talking
Right.
to them directly, and we only know gossip, and we only know these stories. But there was a report of him saying at one time that actually he did feel very uncomfortable about that, about constantly taking these photos of his mum.
Well, it is uncomfortable. I mean, so Liz Hurley, what she's been quoted as saying that she felt liberated stripping off for the sex scene directed by Damien. Having him there meant I felt safe and looked after. That immediately was red flags for me, Lucinda,
Yeah.
because she's the mother. Why is
Yeah.
she looking to her son
Her
to be
son
looking
to
after
feel
her,
safe.
right?
Mm. And as always, being a therapist, I became very interested in the context of their relationship. Is she a narcissistic parent and there's no room for him, and therefore how does he develop a personality of his own? Are they enmeshed, and so they can't distinguish the boundaries between the two of them? Does she see him as an extension of her, because it's always her in the spotlight, isn't it? And
Mm.
the wider issue for me is also, why are all these older ladies constantly having to put bikini shots of themselves on their Instagram? They're all very beautiful women. Kerry Katona, her what's the woman off of Britain's Got Talent? Amanda Holden, um,
Yes, Carol
you know,
Vorderman.
Carol Vorderman, all of them constantly put, great that you look so brilliant late into your 50s, early 60s, fantastic. But really, you're treating yourself as a commodity. And what are we teaching younger women? That all we are, still now in 2024, all we are is a sexual being. And particularly as we age, we've got nothing else to offer. And what is the desperation to hang on to that? But to recruit your children into your sexuality in any sort of a way, I just think is very damaging indeed, and it doesn't feel right, does it?
No, it doesn't feel right. And it's funny, you triggered some thoughts in me there. Heidi Klum, the supermodel, she started appearing in underwear commercials with her child, and they sort of have their breasts pressed to each other, which is just really, really odd. The Kardashians almost never compose with their children without sexualized pictures where they stand on their tiptoes, they thrust out their breasts. We've discussed that before, you and I. So something wrong with it. And I have to say that I don't like seeing young women in their physical prime, half naked on social media, and so I make no distinction about the age of somebody. I just find it like, when you get to my age, surely you should have grown up enough by that point not to be so desperate for the attention that these half nude shots bring you, because that's what it does. It's just attention seeking, and some of these people have so much more to offer than just sort of getting their breasts out, don't they? That it feels so regressive, Lucinda. It feels like we're going backwards.
Yes, it's hungry for something, isn't it? Constant stream of me in my bikini. But the other thing is, I wonder, what do you think? Does it make a difference if it's the other way around? What if it's a 58-year-old man and his 21-year-old daughter is filming him in a sex scene? Does that make a difference? I don't know. Is that better? Is that worse? And it's interesting because I was looking at the literature, and there's not an awful lot on the literature about those kind of boundary crossings between adult children and their parents. But it does seem that in a family, if we're just talking about nakedness, so nothing sexual, if we're just talking about nakedness, it does seem that women and daughters will be around each other naked for older, into adolescence perhaps, and even into adulthood. But even men, parents, fathers with sons, they they generally stop being naked around each other quite early on.
Right.
So even to look at the dynamics of that in a family setting, wandering around your house, nothing sexual about it. There seems to be natural boundaries that emerge from us all, as I said, without having to be taught about that.
Right. And also, there's a couple of things I'd like to say there that you've just triggered thoughts in me. In answer to your question, whether fathers would get the same stick, I remember, I don't know if people remember out there, Samantha Fox, she was a page 3 model. Page 3 was one of Rupert Murdoch's pages in The Sun, which has since gone. And that's where women were topless. That's just for our viewers around the world. And she famously, one was managed by her father, but famously, she appeared on her 16th birthday topless on page 3. And my first thought was, what awful parents, what awful parents have been raised her up to be like this. But the other thing that I want your take on this, Lucinda, because I think it's important, is it possible, hypothetically speaking, I'm not defaming anybody here, but is it possible that to a degree Damien has been groomed by his mother? And I'm not talking that she's doing anything untoward, but groomed, that this is normal, that this is acceptable behavior. Because it's like, when I meet children who've grown up in an abusive household, sometimes they don't realize it was abusive until they get out into the wider world and realize not everybody behaves like daddy or mummy did, right? So I'm just wondering whether Damien has been groomed over a period of time to accept this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it would be interesting, wouldn't it? As a therapist, I would be interested in talking to him on his own, away from his mum. Like, what, as I said, what's his personality? It's interesting that he's gone into the film industry as well. And I wonder how he'll feel in 10 years, in 15 years, you know? But also I was thinking about an aspect of this. So, after all, that is their work. You mentioned Sam Fox. I mean, to me, that's nothing worse than pimping her out. I'm sorry about my language, but I
I
really do. At
completely agree.
16,
No,
it's
yeah,
just horrific to me. Um, but so if that is your business, and that's how you earn your living, and you're proud of that, and we all want our parents to be proud of us and to know what we're doing. So it's a bit difficult, isn't it? If that's how you earn your living, how do you show your parents what you do without those boundaries being crossed?
right.
And I can remember years ago doing a bit of modeling, absolutely nothing distasteful, but there were shots of me in my underwear, in my bra, and I felt really uncomfortable about sort of, showing them to my dad. It was like, no, don't want him to see that, even though there was nothing overtly sexual about them. But I wouldn't wander around at 16 in my underwear in my house in front of my dad. So why am I going to want him to see pictures of me?
Right.
But
And
I don't.
topless.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's the other thing. And you can say, well, this is a cultural thing because, of course, abroad in Europe, women sunbathe topless, and they don't do that necessarily in this country. But again, nakedness is not the same as sexual, the
Set
sexual
right.
side of us, is it? And these pictures are all about posing in a sexual nature by degrees. So nakedness and being okay with your body, there's a very distinct boundary there, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. I completely agree. We've got loads of comments. Of course, Kelly Brook went on Jeremy Kyle with her dad when she was 15, wanted to do topless, and her dad was her manager. I just think this is bad parenting. I'm sorry. I think any parent who has their child taking sexual pictures of them is guilty of child abuse to a degree. Absolutely. We're supposed to be protecting our children from that. And to make them part and parcel of our
Mm.
online sexual shenanigans just sickens me to the core, Lucinda. I mean, there's something not right about it. But that is exactly why we all feel ick about it, because we know it's not right, right? So
Yeah.
how is this still allowed to happen? How is she so, do you think that she could be so lost in her own mind that the court of public opinion, which is completely against what she does, but she still carries on? So how do you, well, like from a psychotherapist perspective, how do you manage to shut out such dissent?
Well, because when we do that, when we shut out alternative opinions, it's because we can't bear to look at, if she looks at that, then there'll be a lot of questions that she has to ask about herself. So that's why we defend against our behavior, is because otherwise we'd have to, one, change it, but we'd have to look at it and we'd have to hold ourselves accountable. And there is always a wider context, isn't there? We can't see people in isolation. We have to see them in the society and the environment that we live in. And I don't know what it's like to live in that world of celebrity. And let's face it, everything is about image, isn't it? So I don't know about how those boundaries get crossed. But to me, on no level is that okay. And I'm sure the majority of us know that. But again,
Yeah.
if I was speaking with her, it's like, what were her boundaries with her parents? So
Oh,
there's lots of questions that I would be asking around that. But if I'm going to get off the fence, then absolutely I'm with you. It's just not okay. It's not
it's
okay.
It's not okay at all. Thank you so much for coming, shedding some light on this. I think these are conversations we need to have, rather than what they do in legacy media is they just accept it. And then it becomes an acceptable basis of people behaving. No, it's not acceptable. I will never find it acceptable of children taking sexual shots of their parents, full stop. And Siv from Sydney said, congratulations, loving the show. We love it too. And I wanted to end this first 2 hours with somebody that I am very familiar with and whose opinion I trust deeply on matters of psychology and psychotherapy and all those wonderful and important things. Lucinda, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Wishing you a wonderful week, everybody. It is Lucinda Lidston. She is, of course, a clinical psychotherapist, and she's taking out Monday's show for us. And I just want to thank you, Lucinda. Take good care of yourself. And I
Thank
just want
you.
to
Thank you, darling.
thank you, sweetheart. And I just want to thank everybody for joining us this morning.